pope was put on trial. That wasn't unusual. Popes in the 9th century faced more courtroom drama than a cable news anchor. What was unusual was that the defendant had been dead for 9 months. Most people assume medieval justice, however brutal, at least required the accused to be alive, breathing, able to speak in their own defense. That assumption was dead wrong in January of the year 897. Pope Stephen VI, the new guy, ordered his predecessor, Pope Formosus, dug out of his tomb. The body, 9 months decomposed, was dressed in full papal vestments, propped upright on a throne, and formally charged with perjury and violating church law. The trial took place in the Lateran Basilica, the holiest courtroom in Christendom. This wasn't a Bacchale stunt. It was official, recorded, and conducted with all the solemnity of a legitimate legal proceeding. A deacon was assigned to crouch behind the corpse and answer questions on its behalf. The chronicler Liutprand of Cremona later described the scene: the dead pope accused of breaking an oath never to return to Rome, of being bishop of 2 cities at once, and of coveting the papal throne. The deacon supplied the responses Formosus could not. Formosus, being dead, failed to mount a compelling defense. The verdict was guilty. The punishment: all of Formosus's papal acts and ordinations were declared null and void. Then the real theatre began. The dead pope's 3 blessing fingers, the ones he'd used to confer holy orders, were hacked off. The body was stripped of the vestments, dragged through the streets, and tossed into the Tiber River. It was a complete annihilation of a man's legacy, performed on his physical remains. Now, if you're thinking this was just a madman's personal vendetta, you're half right. But the mechanism here was colder and more calculated. Stephen VI didn't do this because he hated Formosus's face. He needed to wipe out Formosus's entire ecclesiastical bloodline. Formosus had ordained dozens of bishops and priests. By nullifying all his acts, Stephen effectively UN-priested everyone Formosus had ever touched. Rivals lost their legitimacy overnight. It was a bureaucratic purge dressed in zombie theatrics. Stephen was backed by the powerful Spolton family and the Emperor Lambert, who had a score to settle with the Formosan faction. The trial was a political hit job. The rotting pope on the throne was just the most memorable part. The problem with purging your enemies by convicting a corpse is that it tends to backfire. The people of Rome, who'd watched their former pope's body desecrated, were not amused. Whispers spread that Formosus's body had washed up on the banks of the Tiber and started performing miracles. A dead pope they'd mocked was suddenly a folk saint. Public outrage turned murderous. Within months, Stephen VI was stripped of his papal insignia, thrown into a prison cell, and strangled. The Cadaver Synod destroyed its own creator. Then the cleanup crew arrived. Pope Theodore II reigned for just 20 days in late 897, but he managed to recover Formosus's body from the river and give it a proper reburial in St. Peter's. Next came John IX, who in 898 convened a synod that officially annulled the Cadaver Synod. All of Formosus's acts were reinstated. The very ordination Stephen had tried to erase was slapped back into existence. And this new synod passed a remarkable law: no dead person could ever be put on trial again. The church had to explicitly forbid posthumous prosecution because apparently, once you've tried a corpse, you need a rule on the books to stop it from happening twice. That ban stuck. It's why, even today, when a pope dies, his magisterial acts aren't exhumed and challenged in court. The chaos of 897 gave the papacy a permanent allergy to judging dead pontiffs. Some historians argue it even nudged the church toward the doctrine of papal infallibility. If you can't judge a dead pope, you'd better be really sure he was right to begin with. But there's one more twist. The kind that makes you realize the people running the Eternal City had no idea what they were doing. Stephen VI, the pope who put a corpse on trial, owed his entire career to that corpse. Years earlier, it was Formosus himself who had consecrated Stephen as Bishop of Anagni. Stephen's own episcopal ordination, his very qualification to be pope, was one of those acts he'd just declared invalid. In annulling Formosus's works, Stephen didn't just destroy his enemies. He UN-poped himself. The trial that was meant to erase Formosus instead erased the trial's own judge. It's rare that history delivers a cell-phone this complete. Stephen VI dug up a body to win an argument he was already having with a dead man. The dead man didn't just win, he took Stephen down with him. Formosus's tomb was eventually marked with an epitaph that essentially said, "Let no other pope suffer this." It was a plea written in stone, born from the dumbest legal proceeding the papacy ever staged. And that's why, over 1,000 years later, The Cadaver Synod remains the gold standard for how not to handle a political dispute. When your best move is to put a decomposing pope on trial, you've already lost.